Yeah. Come on, you can have a seat. Yep, have a seat. All right. Peace, 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 peace. We're about to get this early morning teaching in. I want to thank everybody that's here. I want to thank everyone that's logging in. But I always like to share things with my brothers and sisters when I talk about what's important. And that's why I love doing these lectures on social media, and I love going to my members' homes and doing lectures at their homes. I like to call them cottage meetings because we take time for what's important. And I'm glad that I'm able to travel and do these lectures. So today we're going to illuminate some things. We're going to eliminate that European westernized Greek mythology. Got you in your mind thinking everything is a sin. And that's duality, hot and cold. That's how the pendulum swing. You need both of those elements inside. So let's dig. We're going to talk about how people get you caught up in words and you don't understand the etymon and you don't understand the etymology of the word when they're getting you caught up in spookism. Like Nanna, Nana, or sin, Sun, or sin, is a god. The Mesopotamian moon god, he was called Nana in Sumerian, and Sin, Sun, or Sin, Sin in Akkadian. The earliest writings of both are roughly contemporary and occur interchangeably, meaning you can use those words interchangeably. An additional name, which is only attested in literary texts, is Dilimbabar, Dilimbabar. The true etymologies of both Nana and Sin remain unclear. The moon god was the tutelary deity of the city of Ur. His reach and importance, however, was far greater than just a city of God. The moon god is clearly one of the most important deities in the wider pantheon of Mesopotamia. That's why in the science we talk about the sun and the moon family. In the early dynastic god lists, such as Pharaoh, the S1, the moon god appears immediately after the four leading gods, An, Enlil, Inanna, and Enki. I'm gonna touch on that. And Enki. I'm gonna touch on that. And his important, albeit slightly junior possessed, is confirmed in the text Nana Suan's journey to Nippur, when Nana brings the first fruits offering to Enlil, the head of the early Mesopotamian pantheons. The primary symbol of the moon god was a bull. The primary symbol of the moon god was a bull. The symbol of the moon god was a bull. The results of the horizontal crescent of the waxing moon appearing similar to the horns of that animal. That's why in our science we connect the sun and the moon family. This symbolism led to the consideration of the moon god as a cow head, which is celebrated most clearly in the composition, the herds of Nana, the longest section of which enumerates the cattle in Nana's herd. So when we go to these westernized churches and you got these unlearned Negro preachers telling you about sin, all westernized academia. Sin was the moon god. You research that. In Akkadian and Mesopotamia, you need the sun and the moon. You can't have sun all day. You can't have darkness all day. You need both elements. I'm telling you, man, this is science. They done got us caught up in that slavery religion instead of understanding who you are, the God within. The primary symbol of the moon god was a bull, the result of the horizontal crescent of the waxing moon appearing similar to the horns of that animal. This symbolism led to the consideration of the moon god as a cow herd, which is celebrated most clearly in the composition, the herds of Nana. An association with fertility may come from the moon god's connection to cattle family. Also, perhaps, from the clear link to the menstrual cycle, roughly similar to the timing of the moon's transformation. The connection with fertility is demonstrated in the old Babylonian early second millennium. The birth incantations. The magical medical text, A Cow of Sin, relates to the story of the moon god's beautiful and pregnant cow. Genocide, Gemesin. The birthing pains of Genocide are eased by sin, and the incantation ends with a supplication. May this woman give birth as easily as game sin or gene sin, suggesting this text role in human childbirth. Other literature makes much of the moon as the astrological figure. The deity is referred to in terms characteristic of the celestial body, the radiant, the shining, and much is made of the moon's path and cycle, which were also keenly observed for ohms of the future. For example, family, the first millennium series, Summa, Sin, Ina, Tataristu. If the moon at its appearance, the Akkadian literature evokes some of the other functions of the moon god family. A prayer to Sin details his role in deviation. No doubt this divatory or this position role was also connected to the moon god's ability to illuminate darkness. Both the moon god and the sun god, listen to me, family, both the moon god and the sun god are praised together in a further text in which they are associated with issuing laws and verdicts, the determination of destinies, and the announcements of ohms. This judicial role was already obvious in the text of the early dynastic, in the stele of the vultures, where oaths are taken in presence of Sin, S-U-E-N, and in his divine or in his diviner of face, which is used across the Near East, in the Sumerian myth, Enlil, E-N-L-I-L, and N-I-N-L-I-L. The moon god is described as the firstborn son of Enlil, and the moon god's three brothers are listed, Nergal, Neslamtaea, Ninazu, both underworld deities. We got to get out this spookism and get into the elements. That's why you off balance. And the moon god's three brothers, I gave them. And Enbuli, Enbililu, who was responsible for irrigation. There has been some suggesting that this position as the firstborn son of Enlil might reflect the importance of during the third period. There are also occasions reference to a paternal, a filial, F-I-L-L-I-A-L relationship between An, and the moon god, but such are probable general reference to An in his role as the father of all the gods. The moon god's wife is the goddess Nigal, Ningal, and their children are Inana and Utu. The god lists An equals Anum, Anum, also names Nigbula, Ningublaga, as the son of the moon god, and Amera Azu, and Amera Hia as his daughters. Another child of the moon god known for old Babylonian sources is Nemusta, Numusda. Nana's visor was Almuz. In the first millennium, Nuska, a visor of Enli, was thought of as a son of Sin, family. We got to remember that. A relationship is possibly a result of contact, conflation with Aramic religions. From the earliest period, Nana, which is Sin, was the patron deity of the city of The name of his main sanctuary was Ikisnuga, Ekisnugal. The name also used for the moon god sanctuaries in Babylon and Nippur. From the Akkadian period until the middle of the Old Babylonian period, the daughter of the reigning king was appointed to be the high priestess of the moon god at The most famous of these Induyana, who is the purported author of several Sumerian literature. You can find that. But the Mesopotamian cult places for the moon god includes Gaiz, a place in the neighborhood of Ur. So we just have to connect these dots, family, and get out of this spookism when people trying to get us caught up in scary stuff. So when we're talking about Inky, I'm gonna talk about Inky. That's the book of Inky. We connect the dots. We don't get into spookism here. And see, when we talk about Inky, I want you to do some research. When Cain was so-called cast out of the Garden of Eden, you read in Genesis chapter 4, verse 16 and 17. Where did Cain get his wife? You get a lot of so-called Bible preachers, and they say he already had his wife. Okay, I'll give you that. If he had his wife, okay, where is Nod? And if the Most High only created Adam and Eve, who is these Nod people? The area of Nod. Research this. And then in scripture, the Nod were giant people. You got to research this, man. Cain had multiple sons, you know, and he had multiple sons and daughters. You got to research that. So who is the Nod people? You got to research that. We're going to touch that Inky. We're going to touch that. But let's get into this. Let's get into this other part of this lecture. I wanted to give you that. We're going to talk about this Tasmanian genocide. And we just got to get out of spookism and get into scholarship. Like right now, everybody all pro-black, pro-black. And I'm like, brother, you got to show me black is not a nationality. I hear you. I understand you caught up in feeling good, but black is not a nationality. Negro is not a nationality neither. So I challenge you all to do some simple research before we all get caught up in things, thinking we all from Africa per se, and you don't even understand history. You don't understand history. You let somebody tell you who you are. And that's the sad part about us. We let someone tell us who we are. So I'm gonna eliminate or illuminate some things. First, I'm gonna talk about how this out of Africa thing and saying we all out of Africa is false. But the original Australians, referred to by some as the Aboriginals, like so many indigenous people, are portrayed as backwards and primitive. Yet as Strong's demonstrate, original Australians had a rich culture, which may have sown the first seeds of spiritual in the world. They had the technology to make international seafaring voyages and have left traces in the Americas and possibly Japan, South India, Egypt, and elsewhere. They practiced brain surgery, invented the first hand tools, and had knowledge of penicillin. The father and son team bring together 30 years of intensive research into consultation with elders in the original Australian community. Among the conclusions, this is what follows. And you can research this. Humans existed in Australia 40,000 years before they existed in Africa. You heard me. Research this. You got to deal with the archaeology, the Kármán dating. If the pen doesn't match the Kármán dating, you must change the pen. Flat out. Humans existed in Australia 40,000 years before they existed in Africa. The original Australians traveled in large boats throughout the Indian Pacific Ocean rim. 3 distinct kinds of Homo sapiens are found in Australia. I'll touch on that later. The evidence from the Americas, it debunks the out of Africa theory. It debunks it, family. So we got to get into facts. So I'm going to give you this. I'm about to highlight the Tasmanian genocide. Oh yeah, genocide, how Europeans that's destroyed. And it's just history. When you start reaching back in history, you'll see, and I hate to say it, but the European killed and destroyed everything. Everywhere they went, they killed and destroyed. Even the story of Pocahontas. They make a cartoon of it like the Tasmanian devil. They call you a devil. Well, Pocahontas, you think that's a good story. But the European went over there and gave them all disease and killed them all and made Pocahontas marry the European to lighten up the skin, to make them chief, so they could easily take the land. You got to research this stuff, man. This is not me. I'm just a historian. But the Tasmanian genocide in 1826 to 1829 is where Europeans from Britain wiped out nearly all the people of Tasmania. Then they call Van Diemen's Land. You hear that? Van Diemen's Land, now part of Australia. They sent few hundreds that remained to prison camps where they die in disease and despair. Trunzani, that's a picture of him, and despair. He was the last full-blooded Tasmanian. He died in 1876. His name was Truganini. I'll show you a picture when I'm done. But there were 6,000 Tasmanians. They lived in Tasmania for 30,000 years. They were hunter-gatherers, each band with its own land, which it hunted and maintained with controlled burnings. In 1803, Europeans began to arrive, and on paper, Tasmanians had the full and equal protection of the British law. In practice, through even when the government knew of murders and abominable cruelties committed by the Europeans against the Tasmanians, they still did nothing. Despite killings, there were uneasy peace of sorts. Europeans lived along the coast. Most of the good hunting lands were still in the Tasmanian lands. Then in 1817, Europeans discovered that the Tasmanian lands were great for raising sheep. From 1819 to 1824, the British government took, without treaty or payment, huge amounts of Tasmanian land. From about 1823, Tasmanians grew increasingly violent. In 1826, the British government, George Arthur, declared them open enemies, beyond the protection of the law. It was now open season on killing Tasmanians, what some call the war or extermination. I call it the genocide. I mean, we got to get out our feelings, man, because history reveals all. Brothers be getting so caught up in the Holocaust, and I said, you don't even read German, because most of that stuff was in German. Well, I interpret German. I got all Hitler's lectures, and I got the magazines in English. When it's interpreted in English, you need to see what he's saying. You should see what he's showing his people. He was showing who the original Hebrews is. He was dropping nuggets. I'm telling you, family. So I don't get into your feelings when people say, oh, this, that, and they try to throw that anti-Semitic in there. If you go on my lectures, I'll show you that was made up, for you can't talk about the so-called white Jews. Just facts. This is their pen, not me. So let's go. But the reason why they killed the Tasmanians was to get revenge. For instance, one white equal 70 Tasmanians. So if a Tasmanian killed one white, they say we killing 70 Tasmanians. To take their land, take their daughters and their girls in forced sex, or just because, a sport. To protect their sheep and their land, they took, colonized. By 1829, with only a few hundred Tasmanians left, the governor suffered a fit of conscience. He changed to a policy of consolation and protection, meaning capture and imprisonment. The government rounded up the remaining Tasmanians and sent them to prison camps, which featured high salt diets, poor water supply, separation of children and parents, re-education in Christian civilization. You see how all over the world, and I just have to show you how the Europeans colonized and used Christianity. When you look at so-called slavery, they give you that Bible and they give you that overseer. He's interpreting that scripture just like the European, and then y'all run a church with that, talk about you were born of sin. That's crap. And we're not under the law no more. That's crap. That's slavery spirituality. And Negroes love that crap. At one camp, 2/3 of the dead within a year. At another camp, whites urinated on them. In 1830, the government set up Aborigines Committee to look in why the Tasmanians were so hostile. It mainly blamed Tasmanian treachery and savagery, not its own robbery of their land. By 1850, the genocide was already being written off as natural and inevitable. What the late 1800s would see as Darwin fate, when I be seeing brothers quoting Darwin theory, and I say, you can't be a scholar. That's why I say, y'all brothers and sisters got to just stop posting memes. And if you understand the history of Darwin was trying to say some white man brain, the Caucasian brain, which make them dominant. All false. All false. But the genocide was already put in place. It will see a Darwinism fate. Listen to this. Good Christians, see, they already called themselves Christians, did not like being called animals by Darwin, but were not above using his ideas when they acted like animals. In the late 1800s, when mixed race Tasmanians, the children of those stolen Tasmanian women and girls, asked for their land back, the government sent them to Cape Barren Island. Cape Barren Island, that's what the government sent them, where they lived until 1951, beyond the reach of the law. From the 1920s to 1970s, the government took their children from them to teach them the European ways. Since the 1990s, there have been some land given back and apologies made. The G word, most Australian historians do not regard it as genocide. That would be required proof of intent. You see, this type of history is all too forgotten, family, and we're gonna eliminate it. It's so-called Black History Month. People quoting all this happy-go-lucky stuff. They give you our scholars. We have a plethora of scholars in our culture, family. You got to remember, after a visit, remember Darwin went to Australia. After a visit to Australia, Charles Darwin, in the 19th century, the British so-called biologist and geologist, which he just made it all up, this is what he said: death pursues the native in every place where the European sets foot. Meaning everywhere the European sets foot, he murdered, he killed. King Leopold when he went to the Congo. See, Mark Twain wrote about this stuff. And it's a thing called the reading list where the academia take it off the reading list. Mark Twain wrote about Leopold in the Congo cutting all them African hands off for the rubber. I mean, it's there. He says it. Darwin in the 19th century, when he visited Australia, he said that death pursues the native. Even the Indians, everybody, death pursues the native in every place where the European sets foot. On the visit, he met the European settlers that had settled on the hunting and gathering lands and scarce places of the indigenous people. The European settlers expelled the indigenous people from their land. In the process, many aboriginals were killed by disease, family, as they had no immunity to the diseases the Europeans brought with them, starvation and intentional killings. In a hopeless power struggle, the most extreme part of this story took place on a small island near Australia called Tasmania, family. We got to know this. In 1830, a missionary by the name of George Augustus Robertson was appointed to the task of collecting all remaining Tasman natives and bringing them to the Flinders Island, 50 kilometers from Tasmania. Robertson was certain he acted in the best interest of the Tasmanians. Bullcrap. With the help of a native Tasmanian woman named Tringani, he managed to gather the remaining natives, first by persuasion that their fate would be worse if they did not surrender. Same thing with the Christian stuff. When they brought the book, took your land. And after by threatening them violently. Many of his captives died on the way to Flinders. Some 200 arrived alive. The remaining survivors were a population of 6,000. I'm telling you. To enforce the order, the government sponsored patrol teams composed of prisoners led by policemen. You hear that? Using your own people. You talk about the Moors enslaved their people. If some Europeans trying to step on your neck, they're going to use you. That's the color thing, man. That's what they used in slavery. Come on, man. But they used prisoners led by police were established. The patrol teams chased and killed Tasmanians as the soldiers had the authority to immediately kill any Tasmanian they found in the settled areas. For instance, the European would make you hold your brother and sister down while your other brother whip them, and they look. That's the mental slavery. That's the systematicness of it, and it's happened today with our brains. 5 British pounds for an adult, 2 pounds for a child caught alive. This pursuit was known as catching blacks. It became a business venture for both private and official patrol teams. Same way now with the prisons. A commission was established to recommend an official policy on the native issue. The commission considered options such as catching the native and selling them into slavery, poisoning them, and catching them in traps for hunting them with dogs. Ultimately, the commission decided to continue the price system and to use mounted policemen in the hunt. You see that? Mounted policemen in the hunt. In 1830, a missionary by the name of George Augustus, I gave you that. In Flinders, Robertson sought to convert and civilize the survivors. The island was run in a prison-like fashion. Conditions were difficult, with constant exposure to strong winds and almost no fresh water. Children were separated from their parents in order to facilitate their civilization process. Scarcity of food led to malnutrition and disease, and the majority of the natives were dead by disease. The governor said on expenditures in the hopes that more natives would die out. The governor said this when he visited, that he hoped more natives would die out. Wow. By 1869, only Trungani, one more man and one more woman, remained alive. They wiped them all out. All out. The fate of the Aboriginal tribes. Hundreds of the Aboriginal tribes who lived in Australia were destroyed when the British colonies arrived. They lived a very difficult life to the thousands of the British who settled there in the 19th century. The settlers established large farms on what was once their collective agricultural land, challenging and eventually destroying all their land, their nomadic society. Mounting tensions led to mutual violence, family. Wouldn't you be mad somebody come to your area and just colonize everything? And after the genocide, the last three Tasmanian interest scientists who believed that the Tasmanian were the missing link between men and monkeys. Get the hell out of here. That's that European stuff. In Tasmania, the Austrian colony solved its native problem. This is what they did in Australia. They wiped all the indigenous people out by reaching a nearly final solution. It supposedly succeeded in getting rid of all the native, and actually a few children born to Tasmanian women and white male seal hunters remain alive. Many whites invade the termination of the Tasmanian problem and sought to replace it. That's what the European did, family. They always tried to pollute the bloodline. Same way they did with Pocahontas. To take your land. To try to make European chiefs. It's just what it is. Today, the opinion of white Australians on their murderous history vary. Government policy and personal opinion of many whites show an increased appreciation for the native people, but other whites deny responsibility for the genocide. In 1982, a leading Australian newspaper published a letter written by a woman who denied the occurrence of genocide. The letter claimed that the settlers had been peacefully moral people, while the Tasmanians were treacherous, murderers, warmongers, filthy, covetous, parasites, infested, and disputed. Family, we never was like that. We never had disease. The Europeans came with their disease. They only lived till about 20 years old because they were dropping off. That's why they came to our area. We bathed, we did all that. Don't you get caught up with these fake stories that they put on TV. You got to study. We have scholars. It was pure, let me see where it was at. The letter claimed that the settlers had been peacefully, She wrote, it was pure coincidence that they had died when the Europeans arrived due to disease prior to European settlement. She claimed that the settlers were armed only for the purpose of self-defense and never killed more than 41 natives at a time. The absolute obliteration of the Tasmanian tribes is a mark of Cain to humility. Age of genocide. That's the real genocide, family. That's the real genocide. So we don't get caught up in lies and people that's telling us false stuff. I'm gonna leave you with a little something, and we're gonna go out of here. But later on today, I'm gonna touch on the lost book of Enki. I'm gonna touch on that. When people be twisting things, I'm gonna touch on the Nod area. You say the Most High created Adam and Eve, where how did Cain go to Nod, where he had his wife and he had his children. Cain had multiple children. We just gotta touch things. So I'm gonna leave you a couple scholars for you can research. Books and things that we must research, and I'll give you some more later on my lecture. You want to research Dr. Sheikh Anadia here from the Senegal, born in 1923 to 1986. He received his doctorate degree from the University of Paris. He wrote a lot of different books. You got to research him. You got to research Dr. John Henry Clark. You got to research Dr. Marimba Ani. You got to research Dr. Amos Wilson. You got to research Ivan Van Sertima. You got to research Dr. Francis Cress Wilson. You got to research Dr. Joseph Ben Joachim. You got to research Dr. Anthony Martin. You got to research Dr. Chancellor Williams, Gerald Massey. You got to research George G.M. James. And those are just a few, family. But I got to get out of here, man. I got to let some people out. But family, latch on. We're trying to build this temple in Arizona and Vegas, and we're almost there. So you can log on and when people can be part of a real temple. You know, this is what this is about. When you give money to an organization, you're supposed to be a stakeholder. You're supposed to be able to get education, spirituality, archaeology, physical fitness, computer skills. We are educated people. And most of the pastors in churches are just up there polyparroting. So we must teach. I love you all. Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, health, wealth. Shalom Malakim, Aya Asha Aya, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. I, self, law, and master. Shalom.